Good Shabbos and happy Sukkot. We're in the middle of the holiday of Sukkot. And of course, the concluding days of Sukkot are Shemini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Shemini Atzeres begins Monday evening and goes until Tuesday evening. And Simchas Torah begins at that exact same moment, Tuesday evening, and goes until Wednesday evening. And on Shemini Atzeres, as you know, it's been traditional for perhaps about 1,000 years to have a Yizkor service. I'm mentioning this for a couple reasons. Number one, people don't always pay attention to the announcements at the end of the service. And number two is a startup, and I'll explain why in a moment. So, Shemini Atzeres is typically a service when we include Yizkor. We're doing 2 Yizkor services on Shemini Atzeres for your convenience. One is going to be at the beginning of Shemini Atzeres, and that's going to be at 7 p.m. on Monday evening. We are joining with Rabbi Scott Kramer at the synagogue in Montgomery on Zoom. It's going to be a healing service and Yizkor combined, 7 to 7:45 p.m. Monday evening. Tuesday morning, we're going to be doing a short Yizkor service and a short Torah study, and that's going to be 10 a.m. on YouTube, and that's primarily just us. So that's Shemini Atzeres. And Simchas Torah, which is the last part of the holiday of Sukkot as a holiday, as a Yom Tov, will be musical and singing and a little bit of study. And it's going to be through the auspices of the Alabama Community Virtual Havdalah Group. And that's going to be Tuesday evening, also on Zoom. And I recently sent out the links, and if you have any questions, contact me via email, and I'll resend those links for you. I mention this because right now we're on Shabbos, and we're in the middle of the week of the holiday of Sukkot, but these are middle days. They're not Yom Tov. Yom Tov is at the beginning and at the end. And at the end, of course, Shemini Atzeres and Simchas Torah are Yom Tov. But the middle days are not Yom Tov. They're half holiday. Now you're going to learn some Hebrew. You won't find the term Yom Tov anywhere in the Torah. The nickname for holiday, Yom Tov, comes out much later. The name for a holiday in the Torah is Moed. Moed. So Rosh Hashanah is called a Moed. Yom Kippur is called a Moed. Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, they're all called Moed. Moed means appointed time or designated time. So Moed is the traditional term for a holiday. So Sukkot is Moed. New Hebrew word, Chol. Chol means weekday. And so a weekday in March, in October, in July is just called Moed. There's Chol, and there's Shabbos and there's Chol, Shabbos and Chol. So Chol means weekday. Moed is holiday. So this day is Shabbos Chol HaMoed. It's weekday inside the holiday. So this is Shabbos Chol HaMoed, which means that we modify the service a little bit, but not a lot. And we'll explain more about that a little bit later. By now, hopefully you have your talis ready and we can say the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu litzatei v'tzitzit. And we begin with the Birchot HaShachar, the morning blessings, on page 103. If you are so able, you're invited to remain standing. Page 103. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sech v'ivino lahavchin ben yom u'ben layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani ben chorin. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sha'asani Yisrael. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. The top of page 104. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokev kifufim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokah haaretz alamoyim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, mechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasali kol tzarki. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oter Yisrael betif'ara. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten lo yoav koach. Baruch Adonai melech haolam Yisrael. We are seated. Turning now to the Psalm for Shabbat on page number 112. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, tov lehodot l'Adonai, olezamer l'shimcha elyon, olezamer l'shimcha elyon, lahagid baboker chasdecha, ve'emunatcha balelot, alei asor v'alei navel, alei higayon bechinor. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, Tov lodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. Ki simachtanenoi b'falecha, b'maaseh yadecha aranen, ma'agalu ma'asech aronoi, ma'od amku machshavotecha. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, Tov lodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. Olezamer l'shimcha elyon. How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs. Stop. The purpose of this psalm is to remind us of the beauty of the world. And that, of course, draws you back to the idea of creation in Breshit, in the book of Breshit, the book of Genesis, and God stopped and reflected upon having created a world. And that might be why this psalm for ostensibly 3,000 years has been associated with the Shabbat. We're supposed to pause and look around and enjoy the world. And now look at the concluding stanza. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of Adonai. They flourish in our God's courtyards. And the trees in God's courtyards also mirror the theme of creation and the Garden of Eden. But there's one additional element introduced by this psalm. This psalm also says that righteous people have a role in God's creation. And that's not mentioned anywhere in Torah. This psalm is kicking it up a notch, saying that righteous people are essential for the operation of the physical universe to go ahead successfully. So simultaneously, when it puts forth the message of righteous people flourish, number one, it's praising righteous people, and number two, it's giving righteous people an incentive to act. And you and I are the candidates for righteousness. So this morning when you awakened, did you realize that you were going to be eligible for righteousness? You are. It's how you bring your life into the world, keeping God at the center and realizing that you need to bring law and justice and care and humanity into every action you share with the world. And by so doing, you'll be planted in God's own garden. At the Hebrew side, the last 4 lines. Tzadik katamar yifrach kerez balvanon yizkeh shetulim bevet Adonai bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu ol yenovon beseva Desheni verananim yiyu lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri v'lo avlatabo. And on page 113, the psalm for this season, we've been davening this for almost 6 weeks. And in a couple days, just before Shemini Atzeret, we'll stop saying this. And this psalm that's been escorting us through a very turbulent season with COVID and wars and natural disasters will fade away until next year. And we can rely upon that psalm once again. And I'm looking at the English. It's in the center of the page. In a time of calamity, you, O God, would hide me. I'd say secure me. In a time of calamity, you, O God, would hide me and secure me in your sukkah. Enfold me in the secret recesses of your tent, and you raise me up to a stronghold. Now my head is raised high. Imagine being welcomed into God's own sukkah. It's interesting, it doesn't say God's fortress. It doesn't say God's steel reinforced concrete tower. We're being welcomed into a gentle, temporary hut, which by definition stands and then is relocated moment by moment by moment, and it's sheltered under branches. It's the epitome of people trying to construct something that merges with and melds with nature. And that's a reassuring metaphor, an image for us to take hold of, to be part of God's sukkah. The Baruch Shamar is on page 122. Baruch Shamar v'haya ha'olam Baruch Hu Baruch Oseh v'reshit Baruch Omer v'oseh Baruch Gozer u'mekayim Baruch Merachem al haaretz Baruch Merachem al habriot Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov Lireov Baruch Chaylod V'kayom Lo Netzach Baruch Podeh U'Matzil Baruch Shemo. On the English side, we will celebrate you, Adonai, our God, with praise and song. We will extol, acclaim, and glorify you, honoring your name and declaring that you are our sovereign God, the singular one who gives life to the world, the sovereign who is praised and glorified forever and ever. This is your great name. Baruch atah Adonai, sovereign, celebrated with songs of praise. Yachid Cheho Olamim Melech Mishibachim Ufawar Deyat Shemo Gadol Baruch atah Adonai Nachmal Abatish Bachot. Turning for just a moment, if you have the Siddur, to page 128, it's Psalm number 34. And customarily, we don't sing this or chant this, and we're not going to today, but I just point out that this psalm is alphabetical. Every sentence begins with the next letter of the Hebrew Aleph Bet. That's on page 128. It's Psalm 34. I call it L'David B'Shanosa because that's how I learned it. That's the name. And then we skip 129, and we skip 130, and we skip 131, and we skip 132, and 133, and we skip to page 136, and we have Ashrei, which is Psalm 145, and Ashrei also is alphabetical. And you know, Ashrei, for 2,000 years, has been preeminent in our prayer service. Why? There's a suggestion in the Talmud that's very meaningful to me. There's a phrase in the Ashrei, it's about 5 lines up from the bottom on the Hebrew side, it's, Poteach et yadecha. You, O God, open your hands and you satisfy the needs of every living thing. And I think, according to this commentary in the Talmud, that our ancestors were uplifted by this message, that God opened God's hands to every living thing and provided the needs of everyone, everything. It doesn't say God opens God's hands to Jewish people or to the nation of Yisrael. It says God opens God's hand to every living thing. And I think that's why Ashrei becomes preeminent, along with the fact that it's alphabetical in nature. Page 136. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha od yalucha selo. Ashrei ha'am shekachalo. Ashrei ha'am sharonoi Elohov. Tehillah leDavid. Aromimcha Elohai ha'melech. V'avarcha shimcha le'olam voed. B'chol yom avarcheka. V'ahalala shimcha le'olam voed. Gadol Adonai molol mod. V'ligdolato ein cheker. Doloroi shabach masecha, ugvurotecha yagidu, hadar kavod hodecha, v'divrei nifotecha sicha, ve'ezuz noretecha yomeru, udulatcha asapreno, zecherab tuvacha yabiu, v'tzid katecha yiranenu, Chanun brachum Adonai, erech apayim udol chesed, tov Adonai lakol, rachamav al kol ma'asav, yoduch Adonai kol ma'asecha, v'chasidecha yivarchucha, k'vod malchutcha yomeru, u'gvur ratacha yedaberu, lohodia livnei hadam gvurotav, u'kvod hadar malchuto, malchutcha malchut kol olamim, Umem shaltecha b'chol dor v'ador, somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, v'zokef l'chol hakfufim, enei chol elecha yisaberu, v'ata noten lahem et achlam b'ito. Poteach et yadecha, u'maspia l'chol charatzon, tzadik Adonai b'chol drachov, v'chasid b'chol ma'asov, Karov Adonai l'chol korov, l'chol asher yikra'uhu ve'emet, ritzon yireav ya'aseh, v'yet shavatam yishma v'yoshiem, shomer Adonai et kol oavav, v'et kol harasha'im yashmid, Tilat Adonai yidaber pi, v'vorech kol basar shem kachol olam boed, v'anachnu nevarech yah, me'ata v'ad olam, hallelujah. We turn now to page 148, Yishtabach. Yishtabach Shimcha Lo'ad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim V'Aretz Ki Lecha Noeh Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avotenu V'Imotenu Shir U'Shvacha Halel V'Zimera Ozu Memshala Netzach Gedula U'Gvura Tehillah v'Tiferet, Kiddusha u'Malchut, Brachot v'Orot me'atav ya'olam. Olam. Baruch atah Adonai El Melged Batishbachot El Ahodot Adon Aniflot Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech Elchei Olamim. Excuse me. We rise now for the bracha on page 150. Page 150, we rise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or vorech hashech oseh shalom uvarei et hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, forming light and creating darkness, bringing harmony while creating all. We are seated. Turning to page 153, the very last bracha, the bottom of the page, echoing the theme of light, which we just spoke of one moment ago with the blessing after the Baruch Hu. In God's goodness, the work of creation is renewed each day. As the psalmist declared, thank the creator of the great lights, for God's love is everlasting. Cause a new light to shine on Zion, and may we all soon be worthy of its illumination. Or chadash al Zion ta'ir, or chadash al Zion ta'ir, or chadash al Zion ta'ir, or chadash al Zion ta'ir. V'nizkeh chulanu mehera leoro. V'nizkeh chulanu mehera leoro. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer Morot. On page 154. You have loved us deeply, Adonai, our God, and showered us with boundless compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you and to whom you taught the laws of life, so may you be gracious to us and instruct us. Kind Creator, have compassion for us. Open our hearts so that we may understand and with love discern, hear, and study. Observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah. Attach our hearts to your mitzvot. Unify our hearts to love and revere your name so that we never lose hope. As we trust in your great, holy, awe-inspiring name, we will delight and rejoice in your deliverance. If you have a tallis, you gather the four corners together. It's a reminder to reach out to Jewish people everywhere. Shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu kamemiyot le'artzenu ki el poel yeshuot ata uvanu v'charta mikolam v'lashon v'keravtanu l'shimcha hagadol selah be'emet L'hodot l'cha, ol yachercha b'ahava, baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'amo Yisrael b'ahava. Page 155. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'otecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele
Asher Anochi Mitzavacha Yom Al Levavecha V'shinantam Levanecha V'dibarta Bam B'shivtecha B'veitecha V'alektecha V'aderech V'shachbecha V'kumecha Ukishartam laot al yadecha, v'hayulet totafot beninecha, uktavtam al mezuzot betecha, uvesharecha.
The middle of page 156. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, taber el bnei Yisrael v'marta aleim v'yasu lahem tzitzit al kanfei v'gdehem l'dorotam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf til techelet v'yalachem l'tzitzit וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. The middle of page 157. You were always the help of our ancestors, a shield and deliverer for their descendants in every generation. You abide at the pinnacle of the universe. Your judgment and your righteousness extend to the ends of the earth. Blessed are the ones who attend to your mitzvot and place your teaching and words on their hearts. That sentence is referring to us. Blessed are the ones who attend to your mitzvot, O God, and place your teaching and words on their hearts. When you and I pay attention to Torah and the messages of Judaism and place them inside our hearts and live out those messages of tzedakah, of respect, of patience, of kindness, of giving somebody the benefit of the doubt, of not holding a grudge, of granting forgiveness when we have been slighted, we're keeping the message of God in our hearts every single day. Mi chamocha on page 158. Mi chamocha poelim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, norati lot osei felem. Shira Charasha Shibchu Geulim Lashimcha Asifat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu V'Michu V'Yamro Adonai Yimloch Leolam Voed Tzur Yisrael Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael Ofedech Numecha Yehuda V'Yisrael Go Aleinu Adonai Tzavot Shemo Kiddush Yisrael. As we're rising for the Amidah, if you have a Siddur, and I hope you do, I ask you to turn for a moment to page 163. Page 163. As I mentioned, this is Shabbos, and it's inside the middle of the holiday of Sukkot. The biblical name for a holiday is Moed. Chol means days of the week. Chol Moed, the days of the week in the middle of the holiday. This is Shabbat Chol HaMoed, and we're on page 163. And the bottom of the page bears a paragraph that's very important. Begins with Eloheinu, Elohei, Avotenu, V'Imotenu, our God and God of our fathers and mothers. And we couldn't call a paragraph that because we have lots of paragraphs that begin with the word God. So we call it the first word that stands out. We call it Ya'aleh, and the second word is V'yavo. This is Ya'aleh V'yavo. Remember, we can't call a prayer a Baruch Atah because we've got so many Baruch Atahs. So we have to say it's the Baruch Hu, or it's the Malbi Sharmim, or the Pokech Ivrim. That's how we identify a prayer or a blessing, by a word that is a little bit different from the rest. Ya'aleh V'yavo speaks to me. There are 8 verbs in the Ya'aleh V'yavo, all next to each other. Let ascend, let come forth, let arrive, let be seen, let be acceptable, let be heard, let be paid attention to, and let be remembered. And what are we asking for all of these lets? Zichronenu, our remembrance. We want the remembrance of us to ascend, to come forth, to arrive, to be seen, to be acceptable, to be heard, paid attention to, and remembered by God on this occasion. And as you see, if you have the Siddur, and by now, if you don't have a Siddur, I encourage you, if you're going to be joining us, please arrange for a Siddur. If you don't know how to do that, contact me. But every person joining in really should have a Siddur. And if you can't afford $29, talk to me and we'll figure something out. But every person joining in really should have this Siddur to journey along with us in our prayer in the weeks, months, and who knows how much longer ahead. I think we're going to be online for quite some time. Hopefully at some point we'll come back into a physical presence, but we'll still be online. So if you're going to be in your home and you can't get out to synagogue, please join us and have a Siddur at the ready. And the Ya'aleh V'yavo, which calls out that we be remembered by God, is spoken of in a private whisper. And I'm hearing your private whisper, and you're hearing my private whisper. And we say it on Rosh Chodesh, which is the first day of every Hebrew month, and on the Shabbos in the middle of Passover and Sukkot. And look at this, on Pesach and on Sukkot. Here's the Ya'aleh V'yavo. So in these intermediate days, which have a tone of the holiday and also the overlayment, you might say, of Shabbos, when we all need to be needed, Ya'aleh V'yavo is with us. We begin aloud on pages 159 and 160, and then a few moments of silence, and you'll hear me say Ya'aleh V'yavo as a reminder along in your own silent davening to include this paragraph in the Hebrew or the English. 3 small steps. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu V'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gamel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chastei Avot V'Imahot U'Mevi Goel Livnei V'Neihem L'man Shmo B'Yahava Melech Ozer Fokedo Mashiach U'Magen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Avraham U'Foket Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayim Eitim Atah Rav L'Hoshia Mechakel Chayim B'Chesed Mechayim Eitim B'Rachamim Rabim Somech Novlim V'Rafech Olim O Matir Asurim O Mekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Micha Mocha Bal Gevurot O
Omed Melach, Melech Memit Umachayeh, Umatmiach Yeshua, V'ne'aman Atalachayot Meitim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaMeitim. Eloheinu, Eloheinu, Ya'alev, Yavo, V'yagi, Avirev, Yirtzeh, V'yishama, V'yipakeh, Yom Chag Sukkot Hazeh, Oh, Tov. Minion? Thank you, sir. We turn now to the Torah service on page... Oh, my mistake. My mistake. We all make mistakes, correct? It's easy when we have a group of people in the room. What do we do on the holiday of Sukkot after the Amidah, before the Torah reading? Hallel, exactly right. Of course we go to Hallel. We're on page 316. Page 316. If so able, please rise. Page 316. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu likro et ha'halel. The verse stands on the English and in the Hebrew. Hallelujah! Joyfully praise God. Celebrate, O faithful servants of Adonai. Celebrate Adonai's name. May the name of Adonai be blessed now and forever. From the east, where the sun rises, to where the sun sets, may the name of Adonai be acclaimed. High above every nation is Adonai. Beyond the heavens is God's glory. Who is like Adonai our God, enthroned on high, stooping down to look upon earth and sky, raising the poor from the dust, and the impoverished from the dung heap, seating the impoverished and the poor with nobles, with the nobility of God's people, installing the barren woman of the house as a joyful mother of children. Hallelujah! Joyfully praise God. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'ez. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'ez. Hayta Yehuda lekadsho, Yisrael mam shelotav. Hayam ra v'ayanos ha'yordain Yisov le'achor. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'ez. Herim rakadu chelim, gevot kimnei tzom. Herim rakdu chelim, gevot kimnei tzom. B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'ez. Malacha hayam, kitanus, hayarden, tisov le'achor, heharim, terkadochelim, gevot, Kimnei tzon, mi livnei Adon, chuli aretz, mi livnei Eloi Yaakov. Hahofchi hatzur, agamayim, chalamish, le'manomayim. On page 317, about 5 lines down on the Hebrew, and it's the first red line of the transliteration. Atzabeyem kesev zav maaseh yedei adam. Atzabeyem kesev zav maaseh yedei adam. Maaseh yedei adam. Pelahem velo yiraberu. Einayim lem velo yiru. Oznayim lem velo yishma'u. Af lem velo yirichon. Atzabeyem kesev zav maaseh Yedei Adam, Atzabeyem Kesev Zav, Maaseh Yedei Adam, Maaseh Yedei Adam. And the last 3 lines on that first stanza. People of Israel, trust in Adonai, Israel's protector and shield. House of Aaron, trust in Adonai, Aaron's protector and shield. All who revere Adonai, trust in Adonai, your protector and shield. The bottom of page 317. Adonai, Zacharani Yevarech, Yevarech et Beit Yisrael, Yevarech et Beit Aaron, Yevarech Yirei Adonai, Haktanim Imagedolim, Yosef Barai Alechem, Alechem Eyal Benechem, Baruchem Atem Ladonai, Oseh Shemayim Ba'aretz, Shemayim Ladonai, Ba'aretz Natan Limnei Adam, Lo Ametim Yalleluya, V'lo Kol Yordei Duma, V'anachnu Nevarech Ya, Me'ata V'yad Olam, Me'ata V'yad Olam, Hallelujah. On page 318, it's the center of the page, the English, the first half. How can I repay Adonai for all that has been done for me? I raise up the cup of deliverance and call the name Adonai. I shall fulfill my vows to Adonai in front of all of God's people. In the ancient days, this was probably referring to something wherein a person made a vow to bring some type of an animal or a grain offering or produce or something to be shared with the Kohen and symbolically burned up, given to God. But let's take hold of it in a different way. When in your life experience have you had
some kind of a new awareness. And you've responded by saying, I wish, I will. And maybe that's a promise to God. And how do you take hold of that in these days, in our own life experience, especially colored by a global pandemic and many challenges to all of us? How do you live out that promise to the one and only that is the reason of everything? The last three lines. Choezbach zebach toda uv'shem Adonai ekra nidorai ladonai ashalem negdana l'chol amo bechatzrot beit Adonai betochechi Yerushalayim bechatzrot beit Adonai betochechi Yerushalayim. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. And now Psalm 117 is on the top of page 319, Psalm 117. It's made up of two little pieces. The first is an intro. It's a two-liner. It's hallelujah. And then it's these four lines that we echo. Pardon me. Hallelujah et Adonai kol goyim shabchu shabchu kol omim ki gavar aleinu chasto ve'emet Adonai li'olam hallelujah hadol Adonai ki tov ki li'olam chasto. And you echo that. Hadol Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto. My turn. Yomarna Yisrael ki le'olam chasto. Your turn. Yomarna Yisrael ki le'olam chasto. Yamruna veit Aharon ki le'olam chasto. Yamruna veit Aharon ki le'olam chasto. Yamruna yirei Adonai ki le'olam chasto. And this entire tone for the past 4 pages has been exultant and glorious. And you've heard me say this, but we need to say it again and again. And there may be, certainly there is, someone within our community who's saying, wait, I don't feel like singing right now. I don't feel like joyously, with jubilation, praising God because I'm in a narrow place. I'm in a tough jam. And here's this line. Min ha-meitzar, from the narrow place. Karati, I called out, Yah, God. Anani, answer me. Vamerchav, because you, O God, you're wide and deep and broad. You're so big, you fill the universe and beyond. You're the merchav. But I'm in the meitzar, the narrow place. It goes like this. Anani, 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 Vamerchavia. Anani, 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 Vamerchavia, which means, answer me from the depth, O God. Answer me from your depths, O God. Anani, 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 Vamerchavia. Now it's my turn. Each one of us, min ha-meitzar, because we're all in a narrow place. Min ha-meitzar karatiyah, Anani, Vamerchavia.
Yah, min hametzar karati Yah, anani v'merchavya, anani, anani, anani v'merchavya, anani, anani, anani v'merchavya. Answer me from the depths, O God. Answer me from the depths, O God. Answer me from the depths, O God. Answer me v'merchavya. And you and I have to recognize that there's somebody in our community who's calling out from a meitzar, from a narrow place. And as much as you and I can, within our own limitations, our own abilities, we have to reach out and offer support to somebody who's in our community. And maybe that's nearby, or maybe that's through a phone call, a letter, a reminder that every one of us matters and needs to be heard and paid attention to. On page 320, it's the little English near the top of the page, the last 3 lines of the little red arrow. Open for me the gates of righteousness, that I may enter through them to thank Adonai. This is the gateway to Adonai. Through it the righteous shall enter. Again, picking up on the theme in the Psalm of Shabbat, it's the reassurance and the expectation that you and I are righteous and we are walking through that gate and we are this close to God. That's the confidence and the message of the prayer system. And now there are 4 little lines, and you see here the English in the center of the page with the transliteration. Each of the following 4 verses is recited twice. I will offer thanks to you, for you answered me, and you were my rescuer. I will offer thanks to you, for you answered me, and you were my rescuer. The stone the builders rejected has become the keystone. I say cornerstone. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This is Adonai's doing. How wondrous it is in our sight. This is Adonai's doing. How wondrous it is in our sight. This is the day the Lord has made, the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. This is the day the Lord has made, the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. Zeh hayom asa Adonai, nagilah v'nismecha vo. Zeh hayom asa Adonai, nagilah v'nismecha vo. Ana means please. Hoshea means help. Hatzlicha means prosper. Please help us. Please help us. Please prosper us. Please prosper us. I'll say one and you echo. I'll say one, you echo. I'll say one, you echo. I'll say one, you echo. Ana Adonai Hoshiana. Ana Adonai Hoshiana. My turn. Ana Adonai Hoshiana. Ana Adonai Hoshiana. Hatzlicha. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana. Last time. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana. Ana Adonai Hatzlichana. Eliata ve'odeka Elohai aromeka Eka, Eliata Veldeka, Elohai Romeka. This is the Hodu. Hodu Ladonai Kitov, Kila Olam Chasto. Hodu Ladonai Kitov, Kila Olam Chasto. In a moment you say Amen, which is the Hallel. Here we go. Baruch Adonai, Melech Malol Batish Bachot. Amen. It's from the Kishkas, folks. It's like da da da. That's Hallel, and it's also Yom Tov, Nusach, melody chant. Now we turn back to the Torah service on page 168. The Aron is opened. If so able, you're requested to stand by heaving so on page 168. Vayehi bin Soa Ha'aron, Vayomer Moshe, Koma Adonai, Ve'afutzu oevecha, Ve'anusu misanecha, Mipanecha, Ki mitzion Tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion Tetzei Torah, Bar Adonai, Mirushalayim, Baruch Shenatan, Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan, Torah, Torah, La'amo Yisrael, B'Kedushato.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Kalul Adonai Tin Ramamash Moyaktav. Lecha Adonai Hagedula Ve'Hagevura V'Tiferet Ve'Netzach Ve'Hod Kichol Bashamayim Uvaretz Kichol Bashamayim Uvaretz Adonai Amamlacha V'Yamin Aseh L'Kol Rosh Romemo Romemo Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavo Le'adam Raglav Kadoshu Romemo Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavo Le'har Kodsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Shkoyach, Shamash, Shkoyach. The Torah reading today is taken from pages 543 and 544 in the Chumash. If you have the Chumash, 543, 544, it's Exodus. If you have a Tanakh, Exodus chapter number 34. Pages 543 and 544, and I'll explain what I'm doing in just a moment. And there it is. There it is. Okay. So this is Shabbos, but it's also Chol HaMoed. You're intelligent people. You can learn a few Hebrew words. Chol HaMoed. Chol means ordinary days. Moed is the Torah word for a holiday. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur are called Moed. Moadim is the plural. So Chol is regular day, like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Normal time, that's Chol. So Chol HaMoed, the weekdays of the Moed, the weekdays of the holiday. Since Pesach is 8 days long, and Sukkot, including Simchas Torah, is 9 days long, there are days in the middle, and they're weekdays. But they're bracketed by the Yom Tov at the beginning and Yom Tov at the end, so it's called Chol HaMoed, the weekdays of the holiday. Because it's Shabbos Chol HaMoed, we leave the normal cycle and we go back to a Torah reading that has something to do with the holiday of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And I'll be reading just a very brief passage in a moment. But here's the background. Jumping out of cycle. Moses and the people of Israel are at the location of the mountain, and it's in the Sinai wilderness. Moses is up on the mountain. The people think that he is gone. He hasn't come back. And as you remember, they pressured Aaron, to build the golden calf. And Moses came down, saw the golden calf, broke the first set. The people were aghast and agog. Moses was furious beyond description. Of course, so was God. And then Moses went back up to the mountain and constructed the second set of plaques or tablets to bring them back down. And those are the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 words. While Moses is up there, he has just had enough. He is sick and tired. And he says, God, I need your help. I need you to be with me. Show me who you are. And famously, God says to Moses, no man can see me and live, but stand here in this little crack in the side of this part of the rock of the mountain, and I will cover you and I will walk in front of you and you will see the back of me. And a moment later, you hear the words, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'chanun, Erech apayim v'rav chesed bemet, notzer chesed la'alafim nosei avon v'fesha v'chata, v'nakei, and so on. And it doesn't sound da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We sing it that way on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I don't think God sang it that way. But the idea of God's 13 attributes, primarily patience, compassion, and forgiveness, and patient and compassionate, and forgiveness, and granting forgiveness, that's repeated. But those are called the 13 attributes, are expressed. So when Moses is at his bottom, he's reassured that God is always going to be here. And the foundational element of the universe is one of compassion and patience and forgiveness. That's how the universe is wired, by the personality of God. And just after that scene, God tells Moses, and Moses later relates to the people of Israel, there are going to be 3 holidays. And these are really important. And you cannot assimilate, and you cannot forget these 3 holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And that's what we're reading right now. And so the idea of don't assimilate and don't forget these 3 holidays begins on page 543. Number 17, when you go into the promised land, don't make any idols. Makes sense because they just made one a few days ago or a few minutes ago at the base of Mount Sinai, the Golden Calf. And then when you go in, verse 18, observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's Passover, you know about that. And then on page 544, verse 21, work 6 days a week, but rest on Shabbat. We know about that just in general, but it's mentioned here. And then verse 22, and that's where we begin for this little passage right now. The Chag Shavuot. בחג שבועות תעשה לך ביקורי קציר חיטים, בחג נשיא תקופת השנה, 3 פעמים בשנה יראה כל זכרך את פני אדון אלוהי ישראל. כי אריש גויים מפניך, והרחבתי את גבולך, לחמוד איש ארצך, בעלותך, לראות את פני אדון אלוהיך, 3 פעמים בשנה, לא תשחט על חמץ, דם זבחי לא ילין לבוקר, זבח חג, הפסח, ריש ביקורי עד מוצאך, תביא בית אלוהיך, לא תבשל גדי בחלב עמו. And as a side note, as we reiterate and emphasize how central it is to not assimilate, to not worship foreign idols and foreign gods, to remember those 3 holidays, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, by extension Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, to remember Shabbos. It also says, don't cook a kid in its mother's milk, which is the origination of keeping kosher. The origination of keeping kosher is respecting animals. And the development of kashrut, which starts thousands of years ago and continued on for many, many years, and we still observe, of course, today, is the exclamation point for remembering who you are. Those people who were at the base of Sinai and built the golden calf had forgotten who they were. Well, you and I, who are desperate right now in terms of epidemic and we can't get together, could be in danger of forgetting who we are. So Torah teaches watching what you eat every day, voluntarily submitting to the understanding of God, of shunning certain kinds of foods, reminds you who you are. You are bigger. You have a principle that guides you. And now we're going to do something a little bit different. First, we're going to say the Mishaberach for the prayer of healing for those who are ill in our community. And as you know, you will mention the names of your loved ones. But then we're going to study a little bit of something else. It's a book in the Bible. It's called Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. And I hope you do have a Tanakh. If not, I hope you have the Siddur with you. And I'm going to mention a few pages in just a moment. We're going to jump around a little bit and study quickly a little bit of Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. And I'll explain why in a minute. But first, the Mishaberach. Mishaber, Rachavtenu Ha'av, Chaleyahu, Rachei, Rapet, Kolchol, Lev Zekolet, Carol Boys, Yentabagisha, Chana Sobishalea, Azor Ben Leah, Mikabat Cecilia, Elia Bataviva, LaClaudia Thomas, Monica Knight, George Bart, and Mordechai Ben Zelda, George Patinos, David B. Pfeiffer, Tom Bastoni, Avi Moshe Ben Mendel Chana, Chana Bat Meredith, Henry Macon, Billy Singleton, Sherry Singleton, Baruch Ben Imo, Amir Rose, Bat Amanda Jean, Abramuda Ben Gisha, Bet De Palma, Robert Mayer, Shprinz Babashi, Miriam Abashi, Shoshana Bat Mili, Yaakov Avram Ben Chana, Kayla Bat Shoshana, Yudisli Bat Sfega, Timot Dina, David Shlomo Ben Tova Nachman Ben Yamin, Shmuel Shimon Ben Eliyahu, Shmuel Ben Chava, Bet Kulam, Sheila Niskrim Hayom, for Nefesh Urguf, Hash Baruch Amen. May God, who's blessed our mothers and our fathers, reach out and reach to all those who are ill and bring forth healing from
from the hands that fashion the universe, may there come forth healing and strength, renewed energy and vitality, an elimination of anxiety and fear, and a new sense of hope and courage for the days ahead. Oh God, shower blessings of life and of hope upon all of your beloved children and all those who tend them and all those who care for them. And may this day be the beginning of an entirely new year of life, of health, and of hope. And we all say, Amen. If you have the Lev Shalem, you're invited to turn back to page 426. If you have a Tanakh, a Hebrew Bible, look in the table of contents for Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes, table of contents. You might have the word Kohelet, K-O-H-E, K-O-H-E-L-E-T, Kohelet, or Koheles, K-O-H-E-L-E-S. Pardon me. As you know, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is divided into three sections. Torah, first section, Nevi'im, prophets, third section is Ketuvim, writings. And Psalms and Proverbs and Ruth and Esther and Lamentations and Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, are in the third section, Ketuvim. It's been a tradition for perhaps 1,000 years or so to study Kohelet on the holiday of Sukkot, when Shabbos and Sukkot coincide. And you now know the name. What's this called? This is Shabbos Chol HaMoed. You're getting it. This is Shabbos Chol HaMoed. And on Shabbos Chol HaMoed, we study Kohelet, we study Ecclesiastes. Why? A lot of reasons. It may have something to do with the idea that during the holiday season, we see ourselves as going through a cycle, and we study different books on a cycle. That's a simple suggestion. It's also a guess. We don't know. Related to that is a slightly more complicated element. Within the book of Kohelet is the touch or the tone of cycle and life and up and down. So maybe if there's a sense of ups and downs in the cycle of life, and it's connected to the idea of cycling through time, is the reason that we study Kohelet. We don't know. Another element is this. The holiday of Sukkot is the happiest season we've got. Being in a sukkah, having family and friends coming over, sharing meals, holding onto the lulav and etrog and reminding us that the land of Israel is beautiful, all those are elements of great joy. And Ecclesiastes is touched by sometimes moments of sadness, of even melancholy. And maybe the holiday of Sukkot is trying to elevate people who are reading the book of Kohelet and say, come on, let's be a bit more happy. Come on, get out of your doldrums. Come on, let's kick it up a notch. That kind of a thing. As if maybe it's even the idea that the holiday of Sukkot is trying to change the book of Kohelet a little bit, kind of ramp it up a little bit. Halavai, hopefully. We don't really know, but for perhaps 1,000 years we've been studying Kohelet. And by now you should have found page 426 and Kohelet in your Tanakh. So we're going to jump around a little bit. First, chapter 1. There's a very famous word. The word is hevel. Sometimes it's translated as vanity or empty or emptiness. In this translation, it's translated as futility. Futility, vanity, emptiness, hevel. Depends on the translation that you have. Opening words of chapter 1. The words of Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem, and therefore because of this opening, the tradition calls this book, the book of Kohelet, as being a book ascribed to King Solomon. Although he doesn't mention his name, he calls himself Kohelet.
Kohelet probably comes from the Hebrew word kahal, which means community. Kahal means community. So he's probably convening the community in some way with these words. And that's probably why the Greek word, which becomes English, comes forth. The Greek word ecclesia means community. So it's based upon that word Kohelet or kahal. The words of Kohelet: utter futility, said Kohelet, utter futility, all is futile. What real value is there for a person in all the gains one makes beneath the sun? One generation goes, another comes, but the earth remains the same forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and glides back to where it rises, southward blowing, turning northward, ever turning, blows the wind on its rounds. The wind returns. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. All streams flow to the place from which they flow. The streams flow back again. All such things are wearisome. No one can ever state them. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear enough of hearing, which means that every single day, same thing over and over again. And Kohelet's opening in chapter 1 is talking about what's the point if there's just a repetition and nothing really happens, and nothing changes. That's his opening. Only that shall happen which has happened. Only that shall occur which has occurred. There is nothing new beneath the sun. That phrase, nothing new beneath the sun, Ein Chadash Tachas HaShemesh, there's nothing new under the sun, is in the book of Kohelet many times, 10, 12 times, maybe more. There's nothing new. Everything's the same. Sometimes there is a phenomenon of which people say, look, this is new. Kohelet says, no, it's not new, nothing new. It occurred long since, in ages that went by before us. We just don't know about it, but as we say in Mobile, according to Kohelet, ain't nothing new. And he goes on in that path for chapter 1 and some of chapter 2. And then he starts saying, well, if nothing's new, maybe I should just try to do something new and something different. And scattered throughout a number of the chapters, it's total of 12 chapters in length, Kohelet says, I'm going to accumulate lots of wealth. And he accumulates a great deal of wealth. And then he realizes that pursuing wealth just for the sake of wealth doesn't really mean anything. So I've got lots of houses and lots of gardens and lots of gold and lots of silver. So then he says, I'm going to have companionship with lots of women. And after a while he realizes if he's just having companionship with women for the sake of having another night, after a while that doesn't mean anything either. And then he says, well, I'm just going to have a lot of wine. So he drinks a lot of wine, lots of wine, lots of wine. But then he asks himself, if I'm drinking just for the sake of drinking, am I really doing anything? And he continues on in this vein, wondering, and you and I would say, what's the purpose of life? And then we come to the very famous chapter 3, and everybody knows chapter 3. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for shunning or refraining from embracing, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for ripping and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for love, a time for hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. That's in chapter 3. And it may be that as Kohelet is writing and ruminating and sharing his thoughts, that he is gaining what we might say, looking at his words, perhaps a new perspective. It's true. Lots of things happen over and over again. It's true. If you and I accumulate just for the sake of accumulation, after a while, we realize it's kind of pointless. Maybe one of the first steps in finding meaning in life is recognizing that different things happen, and there is a time for, and can you and I appreciate that and see how we fit into those moments of time? A time for love, a time for peace, a time for embracing, a time for letting go. And then here before us, it's chapter 9 here on page 427. Go eat your bread in gladness and drink your wine in joy, for your action was long ago approved by God. And this is one of the few references to God. Interestingly, it's a book in the Bible, and it's only in chapter 9 and then later on at the end of chapter 12 that Kohelet talks about God. In 96%, 94% of the book, God isn't even mentioned. It's a mention of words and phrases where he's, you and I would say, asking questions about the purpose of life. And he tries out different ideas, and he's not always consistent. So chapter 3 is a bit of an awakening, you might say, but then in chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, he goes back down to the doldrums a little bit. I want you to point out to yourself or to me one person in the world who is consistent. Consistent emotionally, personally, psychologically. We are inconsistent beings. And the up and down cycle within the book of Kohelet, I think, mirrors what many of us go through when we're trying to figure out our purpose and our role in the world and how do we fit in. And it's the up and down, which is what you and I experience. And then turn to chapter 12. It's on page 428. Pardon me, it's just about chapter 12. Wisdom is better than valor. We need to learn. But words spoken softly by the wise are heeded better than those shouted. And maybe he's starting to learn something else. To me, it's striking that in 12 books of Kohelet, there's very little mention of friends, friendship, and relationship. Again, 90-some-odd% of the book of Kohelet is focused on this is me, these are my desires, my questions, my challenges. And I know for most of us, we gain meaning in life and a sense of purpose by interacting with each other, by having relationships with close family, with close friends, medium friends, acquaintances. Our lives are built around relationships. And that's something that Kohelet doesn't go into great detail. And then at the very end in chapter 12, a further word against them, my child, be warned of all too many words. The making of many books is without limit, and much study is wearying of the flesh. Much study is wearying of the flesh. So then he says, I did all this stuff, I did all this study, and I wrote all these books, and I read all these books, and I went to seminars and colloquia, and I ended up saying, had too much of that. Put everything in its proper context. A little bit of study, interactions with fellow man, understanding why you're here. And here's the last part.
Revere God and observe God's commandments, for this applies to all humanity. I think the end result of Kohelet is that each one of us is on a journey, and you're going to find meaning in your life based upon your experiences and your needs, and so too I. But there are opportunities, and if we only focus on accumulations, whether it's wealth or advanced degrees or personal standing or social stature or something else, and we leave other elements out of our lives, we're going to ask sooner or later, what's the point? But if we open ourselves to relationships with others and to an awareness that we interact with something much grander than ourselves, God, we can find meaning in our lives. So perhaps now you'll be interested in studying more of Kohelet. If you have any questions, give me a call. Let's study Kohelet on the phone together. It's a marvelous book. I don't know if I say this because I'm not supposed to, but it's actually my favorite book in the entire Tanakh. Of all the 39, it's Kohelet. I love studying Kohelet. I love studying Kohelet. And I've studied it many times with different groups in the shul over the history. So perhaps we'll have another conversation. With that, it's now time for us to do Hagba, to lift the Torah and return the Torah to the Aron.
This one's for Paul. Did you know Reish represents wickedness? See how large it is?
Chas v'shalom. V'zot ha'Torah asher sa Moshe livnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe.
Dun 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 dun.
Die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die Eretz Yisrael b'li Torah hikegu b'li neshama Eretz Yisrael b'li Torah hikegu b'li neshama dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die Eretz Yisrael b'li Torah hikegu b'li neshama Eretz Yisrael b'li Torah hikegu b'li neshama dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die dun die dun die dun die dun die die. Go ahead, Ariel. Our prayer for our nation on page 177. The left marginal note. May our judges, elected leaders, and all who hold public office exercise their responsibilities with wisdom, fairness, and justice for all. Fill them with love and kindness, and bless them that they may walk with integrity on the paths of peace and righteousness. Creator and protector of all, watch over our armed forces and all those entrusted with our safety as they daily put their lives at risk to protect us, to protect our freedoms. Be with them in times of danger. Give them courage to act with honor and dignity, as well as insight to do what is right in your eyes. Fill us all with the gifts of love and courage, that we may create a world that reflects your glory. May we each respond to the charge of your prophet. For it does Adonai demand of you but to act justly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. May the one who brings peace on high bring peace and prosperity to our world and keep us in safety, and let us say, Amen. On page 178, the prayer for Israel. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, Borech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu. Avinu Shabashamayim,
stronghold and redeemer of the people Israel. Bless the state of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them. Crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. Page 184, the last three lines. Eitz chayim hi lemachazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar teracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'noshuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Please remain standing, page 204. En Keloheinu, en Kadonenu, en Kemalkeinu, en Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michmoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Emalkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Sheketiru, Avoteinu, Lefanecha, Et Ktoret Hasamim. Remaining standing, the Aleinu, page 205. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asana kugoye aratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, umishtachavim, umodim, lifnei melech, malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu Noteh Shamayim V'Yosed Haaretz U'Moshav Yikaro B'Shamayim Imal Shchinatu Zo Shchinatu Zo Begavei Meromim Hu Eloheinu Ein Od Emet Malkeinu Evezulato Kakatu B'Torato V'Yadata Yom V'Yadata Yom V'Shevota El Levavecha Ki Adonai Hu Elohim B'Shamayim Mimal V'Al Haaretz Mitachat Ein Od Ein Od. Kakatu b'Toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yihyeh Adonai echad, U'shemo echad. In a moment, the Mourner's Kaddish on page 207. We mention the names of our loved ones. And we remember on this day of Shabbat Chol Moed with great love. Louis Hoffman, Sarah Briskman, Marcus Charnetsky, Kurt Block, Shirley Kaplan, Esther Eisenberg, Irving Burson, David Cohen, Herman Mazel, Louis Malkov, Lena Wolf, Beryl Feldman, Bert Nachman, Alex Block, Morris Beskind, Sarah Leventhal, Barry Ziff, Goldie Unger, Beverly Rips, remembering Jerry Berger, Yetta Lee, and perhaps you have a name to mention in your own home. Louise Goldrich, Nancy Howell. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. Be'alma divara chirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'miru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mivarach la'olam u'olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudisha b'rechu la'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'ami ran ba'alma v'miru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'miru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'miru. Amen. Some hundreds of years ago, we developed the practice of stepping backward 3 small steps and saying Oseh shalom. Oseh shalom means bring peace into the world, and our bodies are moving. In a way, we're committing ourselves to move our bodies in the world while our words are calling out in prayer to bring peace into the world. We're also moving our bodies. It's a symbol of moving our bodies to make a difference, to touch, to interact, to accomplish some task, some purpose, in a certain way to bring peace into the world. May our bodies, our mouths, our minds, and our hearts work in concert to bring peace into the world. And by so doing, we bring honor and love to the memory of those who have died. We will conclude in just a few minutes. Announcements, Adolom, Kiddush, and Hamotzi. If you're interested in joining us for Kiddush and Motzi, please have a glass of wine and perhaps a piece of bread at the ready in your own homes. Pardon me again. If you're interested in sitting in the sukkah, the shul sukkah, come on by. If you want a table and chair, you've got to email me, folks. We've had a number of families come by one at a time, and we have 2 families sign up for tomorrow morning, which is Sunday morning. If you're interested in coming by at a certain point in time, contact me and I'll try to get tables and chairs set up. Otherwise, you're still welcome to come by. It's a beautiful day the next day or two. Just bring your own portable chairs and bring a sandwich, have a little picnic outside. But the morning is tied up from like 9:30 to 11. It's blocked out tomorrow. And again, because of COVID, 1 family or 1 pod at a time, please. And that's available tomorrow all day and Monday into the evening. Monday night, 7 to 7:45 p.m. on Zoom. A healing service and a brief Yizkor, and we're working together with the shul in Montgomery, Rabbi Kramer. I sent out the link I'll send it out again. Monday morning, 7 to 7:45. In the evening, brief Yizkor and brief healing service. Tuesday morning, 10 to 11, a Torah study and a brief Yizkor for us, Ahavas Chesed, on YouTube. So 2 Yizkor opportunities this year for Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres, we have Yizkor. Simchas Torah is going to be Alabama Community Virtual Havdalah group doing a song-filled Simchas Torah, and that's going to be Tuesday night, 7 p.m. for, I think, maybe an hour on Zoom. So if you have any questions, email me. That's the best way of getting hold of me right now, or call me. Call, text, and email, and we'll try to get connected within the next day and a half or so. I think that's it. I sent you all the links in the most recent email, and I'll resend them between tomorrow and Monday morning. Oh, don't forget, Monday night and Tuesday night, you can make Kiddush. In the same way that you made Kiddush last week for Sukkot, you just follow the transliteration or the translation and the melody that I have. I have a quick video for you to follow along with a man who sings pleasantly, and the transliteration or the translation in the Hebrew. Make Kiddush in your own homes on Monday night and Tuesday night, please, for Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. And say Hamotzi, and pour a little bit of honey on the challah. I think that's it. Adon Olam, page 211. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra li'ei nasa v'cheptza kol azai melech shemo nikra azai melech shemo nikra v'yacharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu aya v'hu oveh v'hu yeh b'tifara Voyeh b'tifara v'hu echad v'yein sheni laham shelo lahachbira b'li reshit b'li tachlit v'lo ha'oz v'hamisra v'lo ha'oz v'hamisra v'hu eli v'chai go'ali b'tzur chevli b'yeit tzara v'hu nisi omanosli menat kosi b'yom Ekra, Menat Kosi, B'yom Ekra, B'yado, Havkir Ruchi, B'eit Ishan, V'ya'ira, V'im Ruchi, Gaveyati, Adonai Li, V'lo Ira, Adonai Li, V'lo Ira. Time for Kiddush. Shamish, would you like to join us for Kiddush on the Bima? Et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. Okay, God bless the seventh day and made it holy, and we do as well. Sabre, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. And now Hamotzi, one of the oldest elements of our prayer system, we're making the Hamotzi. Oh, I forgot, Hamotzi, food. Have you brought your grocery bag to join our food drive? We have a number of people who brought grocery bags, so please, if you haven't yet, bring your grocery bag by for the tzedakah fund, for the food pantry. Thank you. Now, one of the oldest things we've done is that, going back thousands of years, we wash our hands symbolically to receive the gift of bread. And that's called Netilat Yadayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sukkot. Lihitrot until we see each other again. May God bless you.